afternoon to all our Heartbeat fans out there. It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon in Grenada. And we'll be having an interesting conversation today with Dr. Terence Walters, a former coordinator of NADMA. And he'll be telling us all about what is upcoming. As you know, we are in the rainy season, hurricane season. So we'll be chatting with him on that. So please stay tuned. And those of you on Facebook, I encourage you to share the live. All those who are on WeFM, Vibes FM, we welcome you. And we also welcome Spice Capital Radio for the first time. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
Previously on The Heartbeat.
Special thank you to all of you. I know some of the candidates are on also doing the same. We want to assure them. I know a lot of the candidates have already begun going back to the communities to express their gratitude. Certainly we will be continuing that. We also want our communities to become organized. We need to have back the youth groups. We need to have back the social groups. We need to have back the culture groups. We need to have back the football clubs, the cricket clubs, the netball clubs, the youth organizations, the drumming groups. That is going to be a main focus of our community development initiative because we want to empower our communities because that way they can hold the government accountable. So certainly, again, we want to start encouraging our citizens who previously were involved in these things to start organizing. You don't have to wait on the government to come to you. If you live in a village, if you know there's an opportunity to bring young people together, if you know there's an opportunity to bring senior citizens together, if there's an opportunity to bring both groups together, start talking to your friend, speaking to your neighbor. I think we must accept that there's been a culture that has been built in Grenada of fear, of victimization, where people are afraid to just do basic things like just speak honestly. Or just say this doesn't make sense from a government or a Grenada perspective, for fear that they would be transferred here or lose their job, or some child of theirs who's in the Imani program will come off the Imani program. I mean, that I think has really held us back because there are a lot of people with a lot of great ideas, a lot of solutions to the challenges we face. But because of the system that has been built, they are outside of that because you can't criticize. You can't offer constructive criticism. You can't open your mouth. You can't seem to associate with someone who, and I think that has held back our country. And I think in a sense, hence the reason why, a rally was called Liberation Sunday, because it was really about saying, we want people to speak freely. I want you to criticize me if you don't think what I'm doing is right, because on reflection, you may be right. And it's an opportunity for me to grow and improve and to serve better. But it also may be that you're wrong. And after I'm able to have the discussion with you, I can demonstrate to you, okay, maybe my position is better. And that's how we both grow. But if you have a situation where we're pretending that one set of people have all the ideas, one set of people have all the answers, we will not progress as a country. So I think that has resonated with people.
Welcome back to all our listeners and viewers of the NDC Heartbeat program. And before we get going with Dr. Terence Walters, I want to take this special opportunity to recognize all those who played such a great role in the recent swearing-in ceremony that was on Thursday at the National Stadium. It was indeed exceptional. And for all those who played a part, on behalf of the National Democratic Congress, we say thank you so very much. We also wish to place on record our special thanks to Her Excellency the Governor General, Dame Cecile Lagrenade. We want to thank the GIS staff, all those who are in protocol, and all the other persons in the background who played a great role in making things the success it was. The police and the police band, and also you had the steel band, which was really quite a great touch for that ceremony. We want to thank all of those. And not forgetting, of course, the NDC family, who played a role in just about every nook and cranny. And special mention must go out indeed to Kem Jones and his team, Joel Greenidge, and all the others who played a great, great role in the success of this NDC party forming the government of Grenada. And not forgetting, of course, our friend out in Carriacou, Kim the King, and so many others, too many names to mention. But thank you all so very much. So now I would say welcome, Brother Terence Walters, Dr. Terence Walters. This is the second time, I believe.
Yes.
Great, wonderful indeed, wonderful.
Thank you.
We are, of course, in the hurricane season, and It's a great pleasure to have you on the program again to edify the general public and bring them up to speed as to what are some of the things they need to be looking out for and how they can better prepare themselves and their families for hopefully a not so very busy hurricane season.
Okay.
So
Hopefully.
share with us, hopefully.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me on the program here, and as we discuss matters relating to emergency disaster management and the hurricane season. So we are in the hurricane season, and the official hurricane season is from June 1st to November 30. There was a consideration to bring it forward to May 15, because over the past 6-7 years we have been seeing storms in May. Right, we've been having storms in May. Although we know that these storms can form outside of the official hurricane season, so that's before June and after November. So you can have storms in those periods. But because of the trend that we've been seeing, there was that consideration, but it has not been done. So the official hurricane season is from June to 1st of June to the 30th of November. And the peak of the hurricane season is around the middle of August, go down to September. That's the peak of the hurricane season. So it is really important for us to understand, first of all, what happens during the hurricane season and to be prepared. Because there are different levels of preparation, right? Different levels of preparedness. And so we have to, because you have the individual preparation, you have family, okay, and you have community, okay, and then you have probably you have district, and then parish. Well, you can have a parish, and then you have the national,
Right.
and then there's regional. So you have different levels that you can go to.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the individual preparedness is really important.
Yep.
Yes, and I mean we're gonna talk more about that, but it's really important for individuals to be prepared. So in 2022, what we have on hand is what is called an above average hurricane season. So the prediction is that the hurricane season will be above normal.
Right.
And then the normal is you have, well, or let's just go with the predictions for this year. 14 to 21 named storms. And you have 6 to 10 of those becoming hurricanes.
All right.
And 3 to 6 of those becoming major hurricanes. So that's the prediction. But as we go forward, based on the trends, this can be revised either upward or downward.
What was the comparative analysis for last year?
Right. Again, last year we had a very active season, and last year the predictions was that it was going to be active. Now, mind you, if we can go through an active hurricane season, very active hurricane season, and not have one impact in Grenada, and we would think, well, fine. But the prediction can be that we will have a below average season, right? So we can say, below average, so this year is going to be, but it only takes one storm.
Yep, just one.
To make it very active for a particular country.
Yep.
All right, or even a number of countries. So it just takes one storm.
Absolutely.
So we have to be mindful of that. Despite the predictions might be average, above average, below average, right? But for the country, okay, it takes one storm to make it very active for you.
So the notion expressed maybe years ago that Grenada is outside of the hurricane belt is no longer a fact.
It is, yes, at all. Because look at just
204
this week, right? This week on here.
This week, yes.
Look at this week on here. We had a strong tropical wave coming across. All right, and if it had strengthened, it could have strengthened into a storm or hurricane or even a hurricane and impacted us. So we have to be mindful of that we're not outside of the hurricane belt at all. All right.
All right. Countries like, let's say, Trinidad, Curacao, Aruba, Bonaire, the ABC Islands, they have not seen a hurricane in a long, hundreds of years, maybe.
A very long time.
Why is that so?
I guess when the storms come off Africa, right, and they track track west, most times they go north. So they continue on a northwesterly path, and they would go. So they would probably pass through like the Windward Islands, Leeward Islands, those islands up that side, and that's why we have not been seeing any impacts in the islands at Trinidad and so for example, the strong wave that passed last week. Okay, remember it impacted Tobago, it impacted Trinidad. Okay,
Went pretty low.
it went pretty low.
Yeah.
So it can happen, but generally the weather systems would go northwest. That kind of.
It is no wonder it is said historically is that seafaring Africans made their way out of Africa and found it in the Caribbean. And people were wondering, well, how did they do this with their limited technology and so forth? But I guess it's the wind.
Yes,
taking them all the
that's
way
right,
down.
coming west.
Yes.
So that's it. Yeah. So, but we have to be mindful again with climate change, where we're seeing the storms. They're more frequent and more intense, and they're doing different things. So we have to be mindful of climate change. So it's no longer business as usual. And just an example with Dorian, I think it was Dorian in the Bahamas. So that storm sat over the Bahamas for a long time. Normally the storms travel at 10, 15, 20 miles per hour, and they pass and they're gone. But it just sat over the Bahamas, just there, as though it did not want to move. Okay, just dumping a lot of rain, and so it did not want to move. So we're seeing different characteristics. We have to be mindful that these storms, they have different characteristics. So some of them come with a lot of wind, some come with a lot of rain, some move very slowly, some pass quickly, different things. So they all have different characteristics that we have to be mindful of.
Yep, yes, indeed. Now, has science now gotten to the point whereby science can now have some impact in a positive way on hurricanes and storms?
I don't think so at this point, right?
I mean, you keep reading stuff and hearing stuff that can be, deposited in there that can break it up, etc.
No, I don't because these are natural phenomena, right? They're natural, and yes, science, you have more advanced early warning systems. Right, which for hurricanes and storms, we have a very advanced early warning system in the region. So sometimes they give you, really accurate information, off by a little bit, but really accurate information about the storms. But in terms of, and then there's the Hurricane Hunter that can go into the system and get information, get accurate information, tell you exactly what's happening. But in terms of man being able to impact on storms at this point,
Well,
okay,
stay tuned, my friend. It's
at
coming.
this point, yes, at this point, I don't know, how much influence man would have on these storms.
Stay tuned.
Okay.
Stay tuned. You will tell me differently in time to
It
come.
may not be in our lifetime, yes,
May
but
very well be long before.
or maybe, yes, but because they're natural. There's hardly anything we can do about, how they move, what they do, that kind of thing. There's hardly anything we can do.
All right. I must congratulate NADMA and, of course, the airport weather control system for the announcements which they gave for the week. Because everyone was thinking that Thursday might have been another day of rain, and it turned out to be such a beautiful day.
Yeah.
It was a day of blessing.
Yeah. I must say, again, with improvements in technology and so, right, we have a really good early warning system, and the Met Office, they normally give us good predictions, right? They worked with the other stakeholders in the region, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and so, and they provide really good information because the early warning system, if we don't have a good early warning system that gives us accurate and timely information, because the information that we're getting must be relevant, so we must be able to understand it, and it must be timely. Because if you get correct information but it's late, then it doesn't make sense. All right, and if you get information early, but you can't understand it, then it still does not make sense. So with your early warning system, that information must be timely, it must be accurate, it must be relevant. All right, and I think I must say that the Met Office and NADMA, because the Met Office is the one informing NADMA, and NADMA would inform the general population. So that has developed and improved over the years, and we're seeing some good enhancement in that area.
Yeah, I must say there has been some improvements over the past several months.
Yes.
We've had some situations where rain is coming and then it's sunshine, or vice versa.
And if I may comment on that, if I may comment on that, I've spoken to some people in the meteorological field, and they say sometimes because meteorology is not an exact science. Okay, it's not an exact science. It's you're looking at conditions and you're making a prediction.
Yeah.
Okay, and sometimes it holds true, and then sometimes it doesn't.
Yep.
So we have to give the meteorologists some slack here, right? We must do that, right? Because sometimes they tell us, okay, we're going to get a lot of rain, but you get a little bit of rain. And sometimes they say, yeah, we're going to get some light showers, and you get some heavy rain. Okay, so again, it all depends on the conditions that exist, what they can see, what they're seeing, and the predictions they make, and sometimes it's slightly off. I mentioned that earlier. It can be slightly off, but we have a very good early warning system, and I think we need to commend them.
All right. For youngsters who are interested in, let's say, getting into the Met services, what would be your recommendations to them?
Yeah, I think it's a very good field, okay, for young people to become interested in. You have different areas that you can go into, so you probably don't need to just work at the meteorological office. You can get into it, and then there are other areas that you can get into. And I would say go for it. Investigate, make inquiries. Yes, you'd have to go off to study. You'd have to spend a few years getting yourself qualified, but I think it's a very good field.
Yeah, the weather is always there.
Always there.
It's always going to be there.
Always, yes. And with climate change becoming an issue for us now, we would always need people in that field.
Yeah, most definitely. So indeed.
And additionally, if you have a good understanding of meteorology, and so you can work at the disaster management office, be an asset.
Yeah.
In that area, so I would say go for it.
All right. Now, is there an existing relationship with NOAA in the United States, the weather control?
Yeah, well, NADMA and the Met Office, right? More so the Met Office. Okay, so there's that existing relationship with NOAA. That's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So there's that existing relationship, because if you follow online, and I must mention here that the information is available online. Information about the weather is available online.
Right.
Okay, so yes, there is that relationship, and the Met Office, they get a lot of information, and they collaborate a lot with NOAA.
And another area, of course, of opportunity for youngsters is actually that airplane that goes into the system.
Right.
It takes a lot of courage to go in there.
That's right. Sometimes I wonder about it, in terms of you going into the storm, because there's a lot of turbulence, quite a lot of turbulence inside there, and yes. So I would say our young people can aspire. Right, our young people can dream, and as long as you start to study and the opportunities become available, you can go to university, go to various different countries, and yes, if that's something that you want to do, why not?
Yeah,
why not aim for it?
Absolutely,
aim for it.
It is said that pilots generally have more faith than anyone else.
Okay,
even pastors.
Serious. Okay.
I see this in the context. They're flying, and all they're depending on are instruments.
Instruments, that's right.
And they have so much faith in those instruments.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's
You got
right.
to have a lot of faith in something.
That's right. In the instruments that you're using and the aircraft that you're
Yep.
flying. Yeah. It's not like you can stop and change something up there. When
Not
you're
at
up there,
all.
you can't stop and change anything.
Exactly,
So
especially when you're flying at night.
right.
Total darkness.
That's
It's instruments only, and the guy in the tower, okay, go this level, come down this level, turn left, turn right.
That's right.
You got to be someone with faith and courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about the early warning systems. Really, what are they? What do they consist of?
Right. So there are early warning systems for various hazards. So there's hurricane, earthquake, there's fire, there are different hazards, right? Some are natural and some are man-made. And we mentioned early warning system, which is basically a system that will give you warning about a particular hazard, and so that you, as an individual or a family or a community or a country, you can make decisions,
Right.
okay, in the interest saving lives, reducing damage to property.
So it's a piece of equipment.
So right, you can say it's a piece of equipment. So for example, with the meteorological office, so the Met Office, that system is basically the ability to warn the population and say this is going to happen at this time. Okay, so they have what is called, they give us early warnings about hurricanes. So they monitor, they use their radars, they use whatever, they put the information together, collaborate with other entities, and provide an early warning. A fire. Let's look at a fire, right? You have a fire alarm.
Yeah.
So the fire alarm will go off based on certain conditions, right? So that's just that piece of equipment,
Yes.
okay? And so the early warning system for health, right? They see certain patterns, and they're able to say, okay, because of these patterns that we're seeing, we're gonna have an outbreak here, so we need to do certain things, right? Just like we just had the pandemic. So they were able to look at the patterns and look at where it's going, and the health people were able to say, okay, we need to take these actions to prevent. So that's what the early warning systems are: looking ahead and being able to warn, so that you can make decisions. And I mentioned that the information must be relevant and it must be timely.
Yep.
Okay, you can't tell me that a hurricane is coming after. Okay,
After
it must be timely. So you must be before, and
Yeah.
and then it must be relevant. I could understand it. I could read it. I know what to do. Okay, so in some cases it's just a piece of equipment that can warn you, and then in other cases it's a whole system that come together and provide the warnings.
What is the situation, or has there been any recent updates with respect to Kikum Jenny?
Yes, Kikum Jenny, again, we continue to monitor, and the main center for monitoring is at the Seismic Research Center at the University of the West Indies, Trinidad. So there are different monitoring equipment at various locations in Grenada and on Carriacou, and I think on I don't remember the name of the islands, right? Outside, just off Sotes, right? There are a couple islands there where there are some equipment. All right. So yes, and so they continue to monitor Kikum Jenny and ensure that, again, early warning system. So you have a monitoring system that would provide information if there's going to be an eruption. So if they see highly increased activities at Kikum Jenny, they know that it may erupt. So they're able to provide the information to Grenada through NADMA, and then we're able to tell the public, well, okay, this is happening. We've seen increased activity. We expect it to erupt. So these are the actions that we should take, etc., etc. But we continue to monitor Kikum Jenny.
Right.
There's normally an eruption around every 10 years, 12 years, that kind of thing. But it has never been we've never seen it breaking the surface because of the depth of the volcano. It's really I think it's about 540 feet. The summit is more than 500 feet below the surface. Right? So it's way down.
Has there ever been the attempt to harness the energy of these volcanoes? Or would there ever be
Well,
into the future?
again, as we continue, so
My mind
there may
sometimes
very
go a
well
little
be.
bit creative at times,
Yeah,
With all that energy down there.
Yes,
How can we harness it
Yes.
for cheaper electricity?
Well, even with the volcanoes above, right? I think there's some investigations, as to how you can harness. But again, we have not. I don't think at this point we have done very much in that regard. But it's some sort of a discussion, and I think it's something that we should continue to investigate.
Yeah, well, as time go on, man is gaining knowledge, leaps and bounds. The next 20 years will be very interesting.
That's right.
Very
That's
interesting.
right. And 20 years sounds like far. 20 years is just a few years, right?
Just around the corner.
Just a few years,
Just around the corner. You'd have all
So-
sorts of stuff going on.
Yeah.
I love to be around to still see all these creative engineering stuff.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, but we have to continue to monitor, and then now that we're into the hurricane season, right? We're exactly in the hurricane season. We need to ensure that we educate our people as to how they should prepare. Things that they can do to ensure their individual safety.
Right. So, what are some of the things that you believe they need to do? But before we get into that, we'll take a short break and we'll come back to that.
Great.
Stay tuned.
Our appointment as cabinet ministers comes after an intense election campaign where the people of Petite Martinique, Carriacou, and Grenada listened to us, was convinced and swayed sufficiently to give us the mandate to govern the tri-island state for the next 5 years. We do not take this mandate lightly. We do not take for granted the fact that you had a choice and you chose the National Democratic Congress. And therefore, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we deliver on behalf of the people who've entrusted us with the confidence to govern Grenada.
Welcome back to all our listeners and viewers of the NDC Heartbeat program. Those who are on Facebook, please continue to share the live. And we welcome Spice Capital Radio today. And of course, we continue to welcome all of you who are on WeFM and Vibes FM out of Carriacou. Today, we are chatting with Dr. Terence Walters, a man who has had extensive experience in NADMA. And today he'll be sharing with us some of the things that you can do in order to stay prepared as we go through the period of this hurricane season. Dr. Walters, tell me, how can the average Grenadian be better prepared for this season of hurricanes or storms?
So, thank you, Terry. I just want to go back to the issue of what we call comprehensive disaster management, which is the management of all hazards, all right, whether it's natural or man-made. So we're looking at management, not just when something happens you provide relief, but it's management before, during, and after. Just put simply, right? Before, during, and after. So you need to know the hazards that can impact you. Which hazards that can impact Grenada? So we know there's a hurricane, there's a storm, there's earthquake, floods, landslides, that kind of thing. So you know them. Know where you live, know the hazards that will impact your home. So you know if you live in a mountainous region, you can be impacted by slides and that kind of thing. If you live in River Road, you can be impacted by floods. So you need to know what preparations you need to make based on the hazards that can impact you. So first we need to, build or try to ensure that when we build according to the specifications for hurricanes and storms. Ensure your roof is properly bolted down and things like that. Good. So, but those are things that we can take on a national level because we have planning, and they would when you go to planning with your house plans, and so then they would look at the specifications, look at where you are, look at what you should include,
Right.
and how you should build. That's the national level there. Now, individuals. Let's just talk about the individuals because we live with our families, we live homes, and sometimes we live alone, different things. And we're talking hurricane season now. You need to be prepared for the hurricane season, but your preparation should be year round. So it's not just okay, June to November, I have all these things, and outside of that, then I just don't bother with them. So you ensure that year round you're prepared because there can be a serious flood in April, like we had in 2011 or 2013, I believe it was.
Right.
There can be a serious flood. There can be an earthquake at any time of the year. Okay, and there can be a volcanic eruption at any time of the like St. Vincent had last year, April I think it was. Okay, there can be, so you need to have these items on hand all year round.
Yeah.
Right. So things like food. You always have a few days supply of food. When we're talking food, we're talking like canned stuff. So
Yeah.
we have here, right, canned stuff. Just an example,
Right.
Then you have water, a supply for 3 to 7 days. All right, and I think we have. Let me see.
Yep.
Water.
Yeah,
Good.
drinking water.
There we go. So you need you need to have drinking water, to supply you for 3 to 7 days. A battery operated radio is important because if there's no power, you need to, and you want to hear what's going on. Battery operated radio with batteries, and there are some nice radios that you can order online. That you can power up using different sources, solar, wind it up, and you can use batteries, you can charge it on your computer. There's some nice little ones you can invest in, right? So within that, you need to have a first aid kit. Very important. And, sometimes we think that getting a first aid kit, we need to spend a lot of money, but you buy small items, as you go along and put them together, and you have a first aid kit. Right? It may not have everything in it, but you need to have some of the basic things in an area. Your important documents, right? See, like we have here a folder. You put your important documents together, your passport and your license and different things, right? Your birth certificates, other certificates, your insurance policies, all of those. Get them together, have them together, so that something happens, that they're safe, in a sealed container, waterproof container. What happened after Ivan is a lot of people lost their passports and had to go and pay now to replace passports.
Yeah. And
you can avoid that. Yeah. Extra clothing. I remember during Hurricane Ivan, right? Because we were not as prepared, and rain. It was raining. We lost the roof. It was raining, and luckily we were able to grab some dry clothing. So have that in a suitcase, in a bag, in a something like that, and so you can use, because if you get wet when you're trying to move or something, you have something that you can wear afterward. Your medication is important. It's important to always have an adequate supply. So sometimes we wait until our medication finish and run to the store. But what if your medication finishes today and something happens tonight, and you can't go to the store tomorrow to get, right? Then you'd have to be without that medication for ever how long. So it's always important to have an adequate supply of your medication. Whatever medication you're using, and it's always good to have a month's supply, so in case something happens. And it's important to have some cash, Terry, because if there's a hurricane or a storm, and the banks are unable to operate, so there's no ATM machine. You can't use your credit card. You can't use your debit card. You can't use your cards. But you need to purchase things, right? It's always good to have some cash.
All the time.
All the time. It's always good to have some cash because you never know. And I'm not talking about $1,000 and $2,000 and that kind of thing, right? But it's always good to have a little bit of cash lying around,
of course.
so that if needs be,
you could buy some supplies.
That's right. It's always good for that, especially during the hurricane season. Especially, all right. It's always good to keep some fuel in your vehicle.
Yeah.
When something happens suddenly, at least you have a little bit of, fuel there. And then you need to be prepared for the shelter.
Right.
Now, this is important. Your first shelter is at your home. But if you think that your home will not be able to withstand the hurricane or the storm or whatever it is, then you make arrangements with a neighbor or a friend or family member, somebody whom you think that you'd be able to, bunk with for a little while.
Right.
If that is not possible, then you plan to go to the shelter. Now, the shelter, remember the shelter, when you get there, they will not be providing meals and all of those things for you. The government will try to provide as best as possible. But when you have an influx of thousands of people heading to the shelter at one time, it is right. So we advise people, when you're going to the shelter, go with your supplies. Okay, so walk with some food. Walk, if you can, walk with something to sleep on. A cot. Something, a piece of foam, whatever it is. So you go to the shelter with as many things as possible that you can go with to make you and your family comfortable. So know where the shelters are. NADMA has provided a list of shelters for 2022, and they do that every year. So these shelters are inspected, approved, and then you provide the list of shelters to the general population. When you get there, there will be shelter managers, there will be people who will, direct you as to where you go and all of that. So know your shelters, know where you're going, and if you have to go to the shelter, ensure that you walk with as much supplies to last you 2 to 3 days.
Now, in these shelters, has NADMA had any challenges in the past that shelters not open on time or not open at all, and that sort of thing? Has that ever occurred?
Right, and there will be challenges. There will be challenges with shelters because shelter management is voluntary. So sometimes you have people that may not be there on time, or for some reason they're late, or for some reason they don't show up, or they may have had some challenges and they just didn't show up to probably open the shelter or probably to man the shelter, things like that. You'd find that. But generally our volunteers are very good. I see, or from what I've seen, there's a good community spirit, right?
Yeah,
people like to volunteer. People like to help others. All right, they like to help others, and I must commend the volunteers who volunteer with NADMA across the country.
Right.
They do a very good job. Yeah, we have shortcomings in some areas, like anything else.
Yeah.
All right, but generally, I think that the volunteers do an excellent job, and I would encourage people to volunteer with NADMA. Yeah, volunteer with NADMA. Call them up and lend your support if you think you can work at the shelter or at the emergency operations center or wherever you think you can contribute.
Right.
Okay, you go forward. You come forward and you say, hey, I want to contribute in this area, because there's training. NADMA provides training in all these different areas. So they would train you so that whenever there's an emergency or a disaster, then you can come forward and assist.
So, as a matter of fact, it's a new skill one can learn without having to pay.
That's
for
right.
it.
That's right. Yes, so I know NADMA provides training in shelter management, damage assessment. There's first aid training, because security. So there are different areas involved in shelter management. So when you activate, when there's a hurricane or storm warning, and you activate, you need people to work in all these different areas. You need people to cook at the shelter, because if you're at the shelter for an extended period, right, there are people to provide meals. There, you need medical inside there. You need people to do public information. And so it's it can be very complicated. Right, and maybe I shouldn't use the word complicated, but it's an operation that requires quite a lot of coordination,
a lot of
and
planning.
quite a lot of planning, and a lot of people to make it work. Okay, so those of you who think you can volunteer and can play a part in the whole issue of disaster management in Grenada, why not come forward? Let NADMA know that you're willing, and yes, because we all have to contribute as citizens, eh?
Oh yes,
we all have to
absolutely. So
contribute.
indeed, is there a number that you can share?
I know the NADMA number is 440-8390 91929394. All right, so you call those numbers. You whoever answers, you ask. You tell them what you're calling about, and then they will direct you from there.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Share with us what happens after a hurricane, and how should the public function and operate after it has passed.
Right. So we spoke about, before, the things that you should do. During the hurricane, during the storm, you try to remain in a safe place, whether it's at the shelter, at your home, wherever you are. So you don't try to move during the event. All right, because remember, there will be flying objects, debris all over, and you can be injured or even killed. So you try to remain in a safe place during that event. After the event, now the all clear will be issued. NADMA and the Met Office, okay, when they get the all clear, then they will issue it to the general public. Now, again, if everything is done, then you will not know, you understand, if there's no radio, there's no television, whatever, it's going to be different, because sometimes they now depend on the handheld radios, right? They depend on that. But the all clear will be issued, and then the whole search and rescue will start. Search and rescue, you're trying to figure out, who's alive, who is not rescued from wherever they were, who's missing, all of those things you're trying to figure out. Now, there are some people who will go sightseeing, right? They will venture out to go sightseeing because you want to see what happened, all over the country, right? But we discourage that as much as possible, all right? We discourage people from going sightseeing because there might be flooding here and there. There would be debris all over the place, and different things. You can get injured and so forth. So we try to discourage people from sightseeing. But in your community, right where you are, try to help each other, because there are people who lost their roof, people who people are traumatized and that kind of thing. So you work in your community right where you are to ensure that people are okay. From a national standpoint, okay, then that would be different, because you're now doing your assessment. So depending on the level of damage, you'd probably have to, do a flyover to see exactly what's going on. You'd probably, then the government will have to declare a disaster, okay, because depending on the level of damage and destruction, you declare a disaster. And we have to now work on starting that rebuilding process, because people now need relief. So you might need tarpaulin. You need to find places to stay. The government may have to open additional shelters, right? So you have the primary shelters that will be open before, and then there will be additional buildings that will be identified, where if there's a spillover, they can go to these other buildings. So it's a lot that happens right after, because now remember, you don't have a lot of information. You may not have internet, you may not have telephone, you may not have, so a lot of things, and it can be confusing immediately after. But what we urge people to do is to secure themselves right after that event. Secure yourself, those around you, okay, in the immediate, and as we go, because the first few days right after a serious storm, it could be devastating, because despite the destruction from the storm, after that you may have looting. Okay, it's like we had in Ivan.
Yep.
All right, you may have looting.
And looting is not a country in Africa, it's stealing.
Yes, right. Okay. Yeah, so you have looting, right? And then you may have your prison population. All right, your prison may be breached, and you may have prisoners like we had after Ivan. Okay, when you have prisoners out, and then that poses a security threat. Then you have places like the hospital, right? If your hospital is damaged, then how do you care for those patients there? You have the various homes around the for senior citizens, for children, for persons with disabilities. How do we treat with all of those? And then all your lines, your utility lines may be down, people trying to clear roads. A lot of different things will be happening immediately after. But we urge that you secure yourself, your family, and then those in your community, right? Ensure that you secure the people in your community, those who have lost their homes. You take them to the shelters, or you can take them in. Different things. You provide food for people. There might be an elderly person in their homes, in their house, who needs assistance, some food, some water, different things. And if you remain in your community, okay, and assist the people in your community, and that happens across the island, all right, it would make it a lot easier on the national system. So, yeah,
definitely.
That's the vision there.
What would be your thoughts, your recommendations with respect to fallen electrical lines? How should individuals deal with that if it's across their pathway, across their driveway, in front of their yard?
Right.
What should they do?
So as much as possible, avoid these lines. As much as possible, right? No, although the electricity company will shut down most of their operation, okay, if it's severe, let's just say that like we had Ivan, most of the operation will be shut down. So most of the lines will be dead. But for some reason, somebody may be using a generator, all right, and it could feed back into the line, and it can impact you. So again, as much as possible, these down power lines, avoid them.
All right. And of course, the same goes for other lines too.
Yeah, the other lines,
Telephone.
telephone, because we had some people cutting those lines. So, some in some areas you had telephones working, but because people wanted to clear the roads, and so they were cutting the lines, and then you cutting off the telephone. So try not to cut these lines. If you can, push them to the side, find some way to secure them. But as much as possible, do not cut these lines. As much as possible.
All right. So overall, based on your projections and so forth, based on the situation with storms that are already named, I know you're not a magician, but what do you think of our situation maybe?
You mean in terms of the projection?
Of a hurricane?
For 2020, Grenada?
2022.
Sorry, 2022. Yes. Okay, so we have the prediction. We do have the prediction, and it's not just for some countries. It's all the countries in the region. And again, we can be impacted, like we saw a few days ago, right? We had a strong tropical wave coming across, and it could have intensified and strengthened and turned into a depression or a storm or even hurricane before it impacted Grenada. So it is possible. Okay, so it is not impossible that we will be impacted. We do not want it to happen. All right, as much as possible. We don't want it to happen. I don't want it to happen. No. Right? I do not. There was a time, Terry, when I remember saying, I wish I could experience a hurricane.
A lot of kids.
Yeah, right, because we had no idea what happened in 1955. Yeah. We heard about Janet, and we heard all the stories and so. But we're saying, boy, I wish I could experience a hurricane. And when Hurricane Ivan came, all right, when we had Hurricane Ivan in 2004. I am saying to my children, and I'm saying to young people, I don't ever want you to experience a hurricane. Don't ever want you to.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. I went to Tortola in 2017 after Hurricane Irma, and then they got Maria right afterwards. And I mean, it was that was Category 5. Okay, Category 5, and I saw the level of destruction and devastation. Okay. And the trauma the people went through, when in my interaction with them when we were talking and so forth.
Right.
And so I think it's something that we should never want to happen to us. But
Absolutely.
Again, it is possible. There is a hurricane season from June to November, and hurricanes can impact us. So therefore, we should be prepared.
Yep. That's the most important.
As individuals, as families, communities, and as a country.
All right. What about school children? Does MATNA have a policy of visiting schools and sharing with them this information?
Yes. So again, NANMA has public education, right? There's a PRO, and they have community program officers. So they work with schools, community groups, workplaces. All right, they work with them to provide a lot of education and information about hurricanes and how we should prepare, what we should do, and yes, I know we did quite a number of earthquake drills with schools. Quite a number of preparedness like sessions and so
Right.
with schools. So yes, and that is very important, because if our people are to be prepared, they must have the information.
Oh, yeah.
They must have the knowledge, right? They must know what's going on. So we have to use whatever medium is available: radio, television. Now we have social media. We have face-to-face. You can, print pamphlets and brochures and so forth. We need to use whatever is available to get the information out and get people involved and ensure that they're prepared. Because again, let me re-emphasize this: if we have good preparedness at the home, at the community, at the district, okay, then it would make it a lot easier on the national system, because then the national system would have to now function or look at the national priorities, while the communities are so organized.
Yeah.
Okay, communities and districts and so organized that they are doing what they have to do, and the people are being taken care of at the community level.
What are the recommendations for persons living under mountains? Should they leave their homes, or what
Yeah.
really should they do in case
Again,
slides occur?
Yes. So you'd have to listen to the cue from NADMA and the Met Office in terms of the amount of rain. If you know that there are huge trees over your house, you have to be mindful of that. Very mindful of that. Either you trim those trees, you cut them down, whatever you have to do. But if you're living in an area that you think will slide, and the Met Office says, listen, we're going to have X amount of rain and we expect landslides and so, then you take the necessary steps to protect yourself and your family. So you can, evacuate, you can go, stay with somebody else until after the event, then you come back. Because you don't want to be in the house and there's this huge landslide and, you end up in some problems. So you don't want that to happen. So again, you take the cue from the Met Office and NADMA and you go from there.
And the same applies, of course, to overhanging trees over the road and huge boulders.
Yes.
Just waiting to release their power.
That's right. That's right. So we have to. I know Grand Lake has a program that they trim some of the overhanging that is going to impact the lines. All right. So if you as an individual, as a family, there are overhangings that you need to address, please address them before anything happens.
Okay, and importantly, also to the clearing of drains. How can the community help with this in the various villages?
So we have an individual responsibility to clear the drains around our houses. Clear the drains in your community so that whenever there's heavy rains, the water is free to run through. And we hear the message from NADMA all the time. Even your guttering, right? Your guttering may have debris. You clear your guttering, you clear your drains. There are objects around the yard that can fly, get into the drains, get into the waterways, and create issues. You secure these objects, and there are things that we can do as individuals that would reduce the impact of a storm or hurricane or even a strong tropical wave, right? We have there are things that we can do as individuals to reduce the impact. So yes, I will say ensure that your drains are always kept clean, your guttering, and the areas around your house.
Absolutely so, indeed, because during the dry season, when leaves blowing all over, they can really clog up these guttering.
That's right.
And then the water start backing back.
Yes.
And then you have a roof leak.
Yes, you understand. You have a roof leak, and then all of that goes down into the gutter, and then it clogs it up, and then you have flooding, and a lot of destruction. So the more we do as individuals to protect ourselves, we're not reducing the impact on our structures, houses, and land, and buildings, whatever.
Right. Now the last rain, last week, Tuesday, Wednesday. Grand Dance was flooded out. I'm sure parts of Grenville. I've been preaching for years and years that we can use simple sump pumps to start pumping that water out to sea rather than just allowing it to continue to rise and create a mess in the communities.
Right.
I hope we can now start introducing these measures. Simple pumps.
Right. So some mitigative
At least
measures.
as a temporary measure.
That's right. So yes, and the physical planning, and so right, they can use a lot of these methods to ensure that we mitigate against the flooding. And look at it, examine it, and do an assessment, and put the necessary measures in place, okay, to reduce the flooding that we have.
All right, because, in the Grand Anse area in particular, the water eventually makes its way out to sea.
Yes.
You have a couple pumps, help it go faster out to sea and lower the level. Yeah, I mean, all the hotels are flooded, all the playing fields flooded, even up to the supermarket and all flooded.
Right.
Simple things like that can ease the burden on residents and so forth.
That's right.
And, we can go on and on with
That's
this
right,
with
yes.
this conversation, but when you're having fun, time really does fly.
Yes.
Give me your closing remarks as we say goodbye to our visitors, our listeners and viewers.
Right. So generally, I want to say here that we are in the hurricane season. There's nothing that we can do to prevent the storms. We can't prevent them from occurring, but what we can do is take steps to ensure that we are prepared and that we reduce the impact of these events on our lives. So I urge the population, I urge everyone to do what is necessary. Ensure that you have a disaster supplies kit with all the items that we spoke about, the food, the water, the radio, all those things. Ensure you have those things available, and ensure that you have a family disaster plan, so that if there is a disaster, these are the things that we will do as a family. Ensure that you have that in place. And if, as individuals, we take all the preparedness measures that are necessary and available to us, okay, then our communities would be safer, and then our country as a whole, right, we would reduce the impact of the hurricane or the storm. So it starts with the individual, and we go up from there.
Great. Well, thank you so very much. And let me just close by saying that Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell and his delegation will be traveling this weekend, today actually, to Suriname to attend his first CARICOM Heads of Government meeting. And as we've been discussing regarding hurricanes and climate change and so forth, we just want to recognize the Honorable Kireen James, who has responsibility for this particular portfolio. Of course, I know that you and Natba and the rest of the team will be working very closely with her. Thank you very much indeed, and this was your program for today. Catch up again next week, Sunday. Until.